Hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Box-Higdon, and I am the Director of Forensics here at Bentonville High School, as well as the current president of the Arkansas Communication and Theater Arts Association. One of my goals as president was to be able to uh, put together some presentations that might be able to help new teachers in regards to forensics, or to be able to provide ideas for coaches who have been around for a while. What I'm going to present for you in this presentation are the acting events, not only for the National Speech and Debate Association, which is the national organization, but also our Arkansas events as well. And these are ones that I will present in class in regards to Forensics 1 kiddos who maybe have had some training or they have not had any junior high training. Either way, it's okay. I do provide some panels on this slide presentation that present the things that I look for, my expectations, rather than what a ballot would say at the national level. So let's kind of dig in. So these are the national events that are offered. There's Humorous Interp, or HI, Dramatic Interp, DI, Duo Interp, or Duo, and Program Oral Interp, which is POI, or sometimes kids will call it POI. The biggest thing that I want to make sure that you guys know is that there could be some language or some content issues in some of the videos that I have in this presentation. And the reason is that the presentations that I've provided are actually YouTube videos of the national finalists at various national tournaments that are held every June across the country. The out-of-state expectations are very different than inside the state of Arkansas. So if you find a piece that has language and want to provide some of the discrepancies and say, like, think about this from a very mature level, but in regards to using the piece in the state of Arkansas, you're going to want to cut out the language and edit it as best that you can. The thing that you will need to remember is that it's important to remember that your students need to be mature when they're watching these things, but also to be meticulous when they're watching. By the time that they get to the national stage, they will have performed their pieces 12 to 14 times for varying numbers of judges. They could literally have been performing for anywhere from 30 to 45 judges by the time that they got to that national stage. And the finals alone has a panel of 12 to 15 judges. There is a reason why these videos and these performances have made it to the national stage. And so I tell my kids, pay close attention to this particular performance. Be meticulous when you're watching it. It's not about entertainment always. It's really and truthfully about education and learning why is this performance in the top 6? Because there's top 6 in finals. But also pay close attention to the performance format, the way that the kid has pulled the piece together. They've started with a teaser, which is an actual performance of the actual piece itself at a stopping point, and then they transition into intro. The intro is very personal. It always ends with title and author, and what you will notice is that the actor or competitor pops back into the performance on title and author. Watching for physicality, watching for presentational style, watching for vocal choices, watching for content, watching for format. There's so many different things that students can be watching for and figuring out why this piece made it to the top. The goal is to be able to kind of nitpick it apart, because if we can learn from these videos of the national performances, we in the state of Arkansas can be up on those stages as well in the future. I firmly believe that. I know that we have kids that are just as talented. They just haven't been given the opportunity to be able to get outside the state. And so with that, let's talk about Duo. So Duo interpretation is 2 competitors. It is a 10-minute performance. Now, it can be a published play, it could be a scene, it could be a chapter from a book, it could be an article that's written in a magazine. Your competitors are going to have a huge amount of challenge just trying to find a piece. That's one of the hardest parts about being in forensics in regards to the acting events, is just finding the best piece. They're going to need to also be able to work their way through conveying emotion through blocking, through interaction. But the problem is that they cannot physically interact with each other. They have to use offstage focus. And when you use offstage focus, it shifts the view of the way that you're working through this piece. Because you're not making the connection. So you have to imagine what the other person's face is reacting to the way that you say it, and then you're delivering it that way. It's a little bit of a challenge. And the other thing is that the blocking, they cannot touch. So holding hands is going to look like this. They cannot touch. But you want to be more creative in regards to the way that you build your blocking, build your movement, build your interaction, and then react to what your compadre is doing, and kind of work from there. You cannot use props. You cannot use costumes. And so you'll see here that this duo is dressed exactly alike. This is not a prerequisite, but this is one of those areas that kind of sets them apart from other duo teams. And I always encourage that of my kids. However, if there is a line in the piece that says, "Wow, I really love your red blouse," this would not be the choice to wear, because that could be considered a costume. So I would wear a different color palette to be able to dress alike. Performances, they have to include an introduction that's written by the students, and that it somehow ties in with the piece, gives us a theme, gets us to the point where the piece happens. There's a number of different ways to be able to create this intro. And in fact, that's an entirely different presentation that if I get the chance to do it, I'll pull it together for you. But at the end, you must include your title and your author. The time limit is 10 minutes with a 30-second grace period, which is right here. That includes the introduction. I always tell my kids there is no time minimum. However, if you're sitting at 6 minutes as a duo, and it's really, really a great piece, and it's very well developed, and then you have somebody else walk into the room who does a 10-minute piece, very well developed, very emotional, strong. As a judge, I'm going to go for the 10-minute because they had more time. So why would you set yourself up to fail by not getting to at least 8 to 9 minutes? My challenge to my students is also, you cannot go over the grace period. You cannot do it. If you go 10:31, the judge is told they cannot give you first place. You have to be given second. And so you can take care of that in rehearsal. So I always tell my kids, get it to about 9:30, 9:45, so that if there is a possibility that you're going to get into a round and it gets a little bit more, in the moment, and it's more emotional, that kind of stuff, you've got 45-second leeway. Yeah. And then you've also got a timer that's going to be giving the hand gestures and all of that kind of stuff too. But you want it about 9:30, 9:45. It's got to be presented from memory, and then just remember that it is offstage focus. An introduction has to be presented as well, with the title and author present for that. Some of the things that I look for is just, does the duo team work well together? I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be best friends. And in fact, some of the best duo teams, they're not best friends. They just happen to be classmates. You want to find someone that's going to mesh well with you in regards to your creativity, and that is going to mirror some of the things that you lack. Like, say for instance, you are not a very good character developer, and so the other person could be lots of different characters, and you become the narrator, the main person that goes through the entire piece together. Your challenge is you do not want it to feel lopsided. You don't want the person whose character to be, very character driven to outshine this person here. Okay. You want it to be equal and together. You want to make sure that your blocking is creative and unique and very well thought out. Now, listen, it does not have to be intense. Your blocking could literally be so simple, so that it sets up a location and you're doing something. If it's in a kitchen, maybe you're washing dishes or something like that, that you get lost as you're washing the dishes looking out the window. Make sure also that every character that you present is believable. If it's a caricature, it's going to feel like a caricature. You want to have those characters have depth and have emotion and have a current flowing through them, each one of them. So even if there's a minor character that somebody is creating, it needs to have that development. And the story itself should take us on a journey, have a strong beginning, middle, and an end. And that you've thought through what this journey is going to look like. You cannot look at each other except during intro. Intro, you can totally do that. And then just remember that it has to be memorized. And I always say it has to be at least 3/4 memorized before you bring it before me for adjudication to kind of give you some feedback and that kind of stuff. Okay. So these are some videos, and I will share this PowerPoint on our website so that you can kind of watch these. This one is so fun. It's called Dr. Horrible's Sing Along Blog, and the way that they create some of the props using their bodies and their gestures, it's so much fun. This one is called The Wizard of Hip. It's only the first part, but Rosie Valdez Block shared this with us years ago, and I have shared this with my kids every year. It is so powerful, and these two young men are phenomenal together, and their blocking is so creative, and they use sound effects and rhythm, and it's just, I cannot wait for you to see it. It's so good. This one is called The Invention of Wings, and it hit the national stage in 2017, and it is from a book. And so that is an area that it makes it very, very competitive. Here is the deal. There are so many different websites out there for you. There are so many different types of play books that have lots of different plays put in them. Your biggest challenge is you do not want to come to a tournament and get into a room where they're going to see the exact same piece. So in starting your program, if you want to use 4 and 6 fanatics, the number 4, lowercase n, number 6, fanatics, you can use it. It's a good way to get started, but there is a huge possibility that you're going to see pieces like that in competition. And then it could either negate both performances because they are the same, or it could make one of them stand out more than the other because they were more creative in blocking or more creative in vocal choice or things like that. And so just know that is a possibility. So if you're looking for books or articles from a magazine or things like that, that might be better and able to be able to find material. On the NSDA website, they have these fabulous pages that you can go to called What to Expect. And this is one that is created by interviewing former competitors in this event about what to expect in competing in duo and what they learned from it. So you can just click the link and it will take you right to that particular page. So now we move on to duo interpretation. Oh my gosh, she's giving me the look. It's crazy. Ooh. Here again, DI, you can use a play, you can use a short story, any kind of other published works, and you're going to select one or more portions of the piece for a 10-minute performance. The biggest thing to remember about this is character development. You might want to steer your kids away from the possibility of using something that's going to have a lot of characters. I am noticing a lot of monologues kind of coming to the forefront, or maybe having one or two extra characters, but it's really a strong one character driven piece. And it is 10 minutes in length with a 30-second grace period, and you will use focal points and or direct contact with the audience. There has to be an introduction. And if you want to do it however format you set it up, whether there's a teaser sliding into the intro and then popping back into the character on title author, or you can start with intro too. There's no right or wrong way in regards to format as to how you want to do it. You can start with an introduction and then go right into the piece. But you've got to make sure that there is an introduction. They have to be memorized, and I push my kids more towards monologues. I think that they work a lot better. Making sure that there is a clear, concise character development. The biggest thing that I tell my kiddos is this: physically, vocally, facially, emotionally, I should feel like you are an entirely different person telling us this strong story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. I think that it is so important that the story pull us in, and that you allow yourself to be vulnerable in front of an audience and create this powerful character. You can develop a minimum blocking idea. Just keep it simple, so that there is just a clear way of going. They're in a kitchen. Oh, they're in a classroom. Oh, they're at a funeral. Okay, so we know where you're at. You don't have to, go crazy with blocking, just so that it implies where we're at. So these are some of the examples from national stage top 6 competitors. In 2013, this young man is the national runner-up, and the piece is called An Original Masterpiece. And it is beautiful. It's gonna tear your heart out. It's so sweet. This young lady got into the top 6 in 2017 on a piece called The Property Known as Garland, and she creates Judy Garland and Judy Garland's story of coming kind of to the end of her career. This young lady in 2012 performed a piece called Crafty. It's so witty in how it starts. It's very sweet, and it's very hoaxy, and then it starts to kind of bottom out. And I also tell my kids, look, the more of an emotional journey you can take your audience, the more competitive the piece is. And I will steer them towards those kind of pieces. Here is the piece on NSDA about what to expect when competing in DI. And then in HI is one of those areas where you're going to create many characters, and the cleaner and crisper and concise that those characters can be, the more competitive it will be. You cannot use props, you cannot use costumes, but you use your body and your voice and your face to differentiate all of these pieces. And then here again, if you find a piece that has a lot of characters, you've got to make sure that they're all clean and concise. If they're not, cut them out. Cut them out to an area where you feel comfortable and can be able to perform these characters as clean and concise as possible, because you're going to want those crisp pops between, which I'll talk about in just a little moment. Finding the best HI is really hard. It's really, really hard. And you just got to dig, you got to read, you got to search and scrub and find and all of that. And you may find a piece and cut it and then realize, not the good one. And you'll have to let it go. Monologues are acceptable. However, it's in reverse now. If you have a very, very funny monologue and then all of a sudden the next person walks up and he's created 5 to 10 different characters and they're all crisp and concise, it's no comparison. So you do want to have some characters in there, and you'll want to use your focal points to be able to differentiate between those characters. In regards to focal points also, you want to make sure that thinking about characters' height, when you place focal points at the same level, we're not all the same height. And these are the eyes. These are you looking at the eyes. And so what you would do if one person was talking to someone who's a little bit shorter, you would place that focal point up and kind of down, and then the other one would be up, and so that they're looking up, so it's very clear. And so then your physicality will shift between those focal points. One of the areas that I always also try to share with my kids too is when you get a script and you've gotten a cut and you highlight each character in a different color, you might take a sticky note and place it on a wall to be able to say, this is the eye point for that particular character, and use that for a while until you've got it memorized and you've got your pops crispened up and all of that. The time frame, 10 minutes with a 30-second grace period, no time minimum. However, I always say 8 to 9 minutes, preferably closer to 9. And then remember that you really want to shoot for about 9:30, 9:45, and then be wrapping it up so that you're really close. For me, on my program, I want them to be as competitive as possible in regards to their events. And plus it's better for them on a learning capacity to be able to learn more about HI in regards to creating different characters. And so I ask that they have more than 3 characters in the piece, but not too many that they can't handle the amount. And then you want very clear, concise, crisp transitions between each character. And so you want to think about each character physically, vocally, facially, emotionally, so that if you were sitting across from them and observing them speaking to you, how would you be able to mimic them is basically what I tell them. And then as you're cutting the piece itself, you want to make sure that you cut for a strong story, beginning, middle, and an end. And if there's an emotional spin on it that takes you on a little bit of an emotional journey at the end, that's going to be really, really competitive, and it's preferred. Pops are a must between each character, and the piece has to be memorized, and then blocking is obviously the same thing. A pop is predominantly used in HI and POI. POI sometimes, but not so much, because POI you have the page turn. DI sometimes, but not very much. You'll notice the pops more so in HI. You can use sound effects to be able to shift between each pop. So you've got here and then shoo, so that you've got different physicalities and facial choices happening, and using a sound effect to be able to do that. This is the one that is very impressive. This young man in 2017 took first place on the national stage, and he was a 9th grader out of Florida. The piece itself has a couple of questionable moments, but it is very, very funny. There are, it showcases that moment of the difference between being in the state of Arkansas and what judges will allow past their bias versus hitting the national stage. And the thing that you got to remember is that this young man reached the national stage after being seen by 35 to 40 judges in front of a panel of 15 judges, and took first place. And the piece is phenomenal. This one is called Defending Your Life. It is so sweet. It is so good. I cannot wait for you guys to see it. And then this young lady is phenomenal. The way that she makes vocal choices and the way she uses her voice as well as her face. Oh, it's so good. It's so witty and fun. And then this young man is the national champion, kicking and screaming, and his facials are so good. Here also is the NSDA What to Expect When You're Competing in Humorous Interp. And now let's move on to the Arkansas events. Now, Arkansas has these events. However, NSDA does offer a prose and poetry option, but it's called oral interpretation. And the difference is that in the state of Arkansas, we do 5 minutes with a 30-second grace period. However, on the national circuit, they do 10 minutes with a 30-second grace period of prose and poetry. So if you enter into oral interp, you have to have both. You have to have prose and you have to have poetry. And so round 1 will be your prose, round 2 will be your poetry, round 3 will be your prose, round 4 will be your poetry, vice versa. Okay, so prose. This is a black book event, so you will need to make sure that you have a B&B that you purchase and that you use on the circuit with your pros in it. The reader must use the script. However, I encourage my competitors to be memorized and then to just lightly look down on the page as they're turning the page so that they are connected to that script. You will need to have your student provide an introduction and the B&B must be closed when you do that so that it is very signature to the judge. This is their intro. And then at the end, you'll do title and author and you've got your B&B ready to go. Okay. The reader can move. But normally what I do is I will say, don't move crazy. So you'll want to do like a 3 to 4 square on the classroom floor parameter and meet it from there. I always like to have multiple well-developed characters. I expect a strong, cohesive story. Do not let your kids do the first chapter of a book. They have to read the entire story. Now, they're not going to tell the entire story because that's a lot. That's hard to do that in a 5-minute time frame. However, leaving the audience in suspense might be an idea so that you cut it to leave them in suspense as to what happens. Or just, doing a section of an interaction between two characters could be powerful. I also go more towards the aspect of I prefer black pages to white pages in B&Bs because I want the black book to kind of blend in. And if you take your black book and accidentally tip it, they'll see the white pages. And where I want the judge looking is right here. I want them looking at the competitor's face, not at the book. Okay, so it's super, super important that they do that. Here is a young man in 2018 who was the national champion in prose, and so give that a look. And then in poetry, there's a number of different ways to do poetry. You can do it in a traditional format, which is poem after poem after poem after poem, or you can do it as a poetic program. And that is to take poem number 1 as your teaser, go into intro, come back to poem number 1, blend it into 2, go back to number 1, poem number 3, end with poem number 1, so that you've blended it. Your intro should state that, though, in regards to the poetic program. Okay, the introduction must be presented. And in regards to the poetic program, I always tell my kiddos that they need to say in the following piece entitled Love, a poetic program. And then it has to have because love is all we need. And so that has a because statement attached to it. If you're doing the traditional format, you don't do that. You will just state title author, title poet, title poet, title poet, and go from there. And then it's 5 minutes with a 30-second grace period. This is the National Poetry Champion in 2013. And notice the white pages. She is phenomenal, though, in her physicalities. And then I always ask that this be black because it just kind of blends in. In regards to slam, I always tell my kids, watch the slam poetry, but listen to it for rhythm. It should be for rhythm only. Okay. Therein lies some of the problem, is that it's important that it not be slam. It cannot be slam, and that they're all connected to each other. This is also the young man who won in regards to poetry. Storytelling is very, very, very creative. And it use one chair, and you've got to use that one chair as creatively as possible, and get into the library, to the children's section, and find your pieces there. The story has to have high energy so that it is a piece that is creative and fun, and that your audience needs to be in the mindset of a 3 to 4 year old. Very well developed characters. Use that chair creatively and be very, very picky about the piece itself. This young man doesn't use the chair a lot, but he tells a really good story. In regards to duo, the biggest misconception about duo is that it is improvised. Yes, it is on some levels. However, you got to practice. You got to know how to work with your partner. Okay. Practice makes perfect in regards to understanding what makes your partner tick. So good partners will listen to each other. They will move that story forward. They will practice responding honestly, and they don't go in for the funny all the time. If you force a storyline, if you force your topic, it's going to feel forced. Okay, you've got to be able to bookend it and have more fun with the piece. And then, is the team in sync with each other? Good partners don't negate what's happening. They say yes and. They don't refuse information. They don't make everybody else do the work because then it feels one-sided. That's a problem, okay? Avoiding a topic and kind of going around it while your other partner's trying to steer it, that's a huge problem. No, you're going against the grain when you should be going with the grain. And then removing an idea that's been already started. Some of the areas that you can start to do with exercises is maybe trying to do an entire scene in gibberish. Trying to do an entire scene in verse, maybe just focusing on story arcs, beginning, middle, and an end. Maybe also spending some time rehearsing together on who, what, when, where's. Prop transformation. That's not necessarily allowed in competition. However, it will help kind of how do you work together. Okay. There's lots of different options out there. The biggest thing to remember is to keep it clean in the state of Arkansas. Make sure that it is a strong story, that your topic is included in the story somehow, and that you can bookend it. If you can, do it, and then practice. It shows with those teams that do practice. Okay. This is a link to an article I found about 101 improv tips. Super, super important. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at this email. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Take care.